Most beginners think that finishing a game in 60 days is impossible, and I wasted years believing that lie until I discovered the right way. And if I'd just known this sooner, I could have released my first game in just 2 months. And what's the thing, you might ask? Well, that's in game development, you can't be a perfectionist. You can't be a perfectionist in game dev. And I only released my first game, Neon Surge, after I overcame my perfectionism. So you've probably taken a personality test. You might have not. And I did one on, I think the site was 16 personalities, but they might be a little different. I had a score of 90% perfectionism. 90%. That's almost 100. So I'm basically a textbook perfectionist. Almost, at least. It's no surprise that I struggle with perfectionism in game development, thinking that everything had to be perfect before I started or I released something. So basically I'm the perfect person to talk about this, like a textbook perfectionist basically, like 90%, not 100, but 90% perfectionist, and I struggle with this in game development. Then I overcame it and released my first game and even second game. And I think this is something that you might also relate to, that you try to end up trying to learn everything before you ever start your own projects or experiments. So right now you might just be thinking, like unconsciously, that you aren't good enough to make experiments or small prototypes, like small experiences, not full games, but just experiences. You might think that you aren't good enough for that yet, but that's wrong. Like basically, unless you don't know what a variable or a function is in game development, which I'm assuming that you do, then you can start and should start making experiments in your game engine. You don't need to learn everything first, then just make a full complete prototype or a full game even. That's not how we learn game development. Do you really think a Michelin star chef started by making these 3-hour long meals? I don't know how long it takes to make like a Michelin star meal, but do you really think that they started doing these? Or do you think they started making something really simple like scrambled eggs when they were kids? And then they improved the scrambled eggs, like they added some seasoning, cooked it slowly, added butter instead of oils and all these things? Well, obviously it's the first one. They started with something really simple, really small, really easy to do, and they gradually improved on that. They started first improving their scrambled eggs, then they just made more advanced foods and meals. Game development and cooking is the same, basically. No, it's not, but learning it is actually quite similar when you think about it. But a lot of people learning game development don't learn like in the way that we learn other things, like we learn cooking. They think that they can just start making the Michelin star meals straight away. But obviously that's not correct. You can't. You can't just read a cooking book, watch a cooking YouTuber or cooking tutorials on YouTube forever. You can't just watch cooking shows, read cooking books forever, and then you start making Michelin star meals. That's not how you learn cooking. You learn cooking by making the meals, improving them, and then maybe spending around 10% of your time watching cooking shows, watching cooking books, watching cooking YouTube, searching on the internet, all these other cooking things like the theory and the passive learning of cooking. 90% of your time should be spent making meals and making food. The same applies to game development. 90% of our time should be spent experimenting, building projects. 10% of our time should be reading guides, reading theory, and getting like concepts overview, things that we don't know about yet, like doing these passive things. The things that you're doing maybe 100% of right now, like watching tutorials or guides. And this is one of the most common traps in game development. It's kind of like a loop or a spiral, because you never get better because you don't start your own projects or experiments. Then, since you don't become better, that just reinforces that belief that you're not good enough to make projects. And in turn, since you think you're not good enough, then you watch tutorials or guides, then you don't make your own projects. That in turn reinforces your belief that you're not good enough, then you watch more tutorials or guides, and it's just a endless loop. And this exact loop, our spiral, is what I call the restart spiral. That's basically where you have no momentum and you aren't building anything and you don't get these small wins. Or maybe you are actually building things and you are making projects, but you planned it to be too big, so you don't build any momentum, you don't build this winning momentum. And that's still the restart spiral. The restart spiral can be caused by 3 things. So listen closely. It can be caused by 1, overwhelm, lack of momentum, or 3, you guessed it, perfectionism. And in this video, we'll just focus on the third one, perfectionism. So I kind of explained the restart spiral like shortly, but just to summarize, the restart spiral is basically where you never achieve something, so in turn you never learn, and thus making you unable to achieve anything. So that's kind of looper. But inside of Smart Indie, I give you the exact 60-day framework that is designed specifically for your situation to release your first game within only 60 days, while avoiding the restart spiral and the other traps that come with game development, like tutorial hell and so on and so on. So if that sounded interesting, click the first link in the description. So now you know about the restart spiral and the 3 main causes, but for now we'll just focus on the perfectionism part of the restart spiral. And how do we break out of this spiral, you might ask, or you might even have figured it out, and that's by building small things, getting small wins, basically. Just by building something small and messy. It's basically the easiest possible thing that you can possibly do without searching online. If you can like make a button in Unity or in a game engine, then that should be your experiment. And after that, you should experiment with the things that you think you know you can do, but you're not really sure. Like you roughly think that you can change the button color. That's a perfect experiment. Make a button, change its color, like try to experiment and find out how you do it yourself. Because in learning, just restricting access to information, like obviously you could just ask AI and it would take you 10 seconds. Obviously we can do that, but we're trying to learn here, we aren't trying to build. So for learning, the best thing is actually to on purpose restrict our information, like our information access. And the best possible way would be to obviously experiment with ourselves. Like in the case of changing the button color, like even if you have a very like fundamental understanding of your game engine, you probably can figure out that to change the button color you have to reference the image on the button and just type dot color and the color you want, basically. So that's something that you can find out yourself. That's not something that you need to search up. You could easily spend 1 hour, and as long as you know like the basics of your engine, you would figure it out, and it wouldn't take you 1 hour, hopefully. But just an example, restricting your information, like your access to the solution, that's the best for learning. But with that being said, I could easily say that and end the video, but I know that you want to do this. If I got told this when I got started and I was a perfectionist, I wouldn't do it, even though I heard this knowledge. So this is where the perfectionist problem actually comes in. So if you are a perfectionist and you relate to the things that I just said, listen closely now, because you aren't going to start small due to perfectionism. And this also can be related to like your ego, because when you're watching tutorials, you think that you're learning more than you actually do. So you might even think of yourself like an intermediate even though you haven't done anything, you have just watched tutorials. And that's the same that I did. I thought that I was being an intermediate. I was learning like intermediate or advanced concepts, even though I hadn't made anything and I couldn't do anything, because like on paper I understood it, but I couldn't implement anything of the things that I actually learned from the tutorials. So it's not hard to see why we think that we are more knowledgeable than we actually are. But that's a problem, because like sure, we can be knowledgeable on paper, like in theory, like we read this book, okay, cool. But can we actually implement the things that we learned, like we read in the book or watch tutorial on? Can we actually implement that into the game engine, like do them? No, you can't. Like if you say, yeah, I know this concept, but you can't really implement it into reality. Like all these business teachers, like in business school, that have never made their own business, it's just cringe, honestly. What you need to do is just forget your ego, lay that down for like 1 moment. I know it's very hard, especially in the beginning, because you're going to do like very, very simple things, even simpler than you're thinking about right now, by the way. It's going to be like the simplest thing you can do. The goal here is just to build momentum. I know it's going to be very hard to forget about your ego, start small. I know that's going to be very hard, but if you just do it, you listen to me, I promise you it's going to skyrocket your progress in the future. I promise you it's going to help you a lot. And after you made some experiments, you can start making like gradually like bigger experiments. Like you challenge yourself just 1 step above like what you're comfortable with. So it should be things that, like I talked about before, something that you are kind of unsure that you can do, like you're unsure of the exact solution, but you could probably figure it out if you got enough time. Like that's the perfect level to get. And then after that, you can start making prototypes. Like instead of just experimenting with one feature, you can then start implementing like multiple experiments into one. Let's say you made experiments about player movement. So your first experiment, like obviously this is dependent on what you know and the things that you know and you're scalable. But let's say you were at a skill level where you could start experimenting with player movement. For example, your first experiment might be that pressing one key moves the player in one direction. And the next one is where you implement all the WASD, so you can move like top down in all four directions. And then your next experiment might be running, for example. So after you made a few experiments, you can start implementing them together and start making some prototypes, like small experiments, not full games yet, but just small experiments that you can even release on itch.io. But for this, you have to be like kind of creative, and you kind of have to know like a framework of the things you're going to make. So in the first link below, I have linked 10 prototype challenges that you can try once you come to that level. So once you start making prototypes, then you can click the first link in the description, and I'm going to have 10 prototype challenges for you inside of there, where you get 10 ideas of prototype ideas specifically for your skill level, like beginners, which is going to skyrocket your progress, because I know how important it is for beginners to start building. So click the first link below. So that's it for this video. Just to summarize, first you have to overcome your perfectionism by building small experiments. And I have one action step for you, which is going to be to build one experiment today. So right after you watch this video, if you have like 1 or 2 hours, open up your game engine, do one experiment, and that should be it. One experiment, don't search for it at all. That's it. If you do that, then you came from the wrong path into the right path. That's the first step.